Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sheila Bauman, and I'm the events planner for Kitchener Public Library, and I'm pleased to welcome you to tonight's event. Before we begin the program, I would like to start with a territorial acknowledgement. As we gather, we are reminded that the library is situated on land that is the traditional home of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions Indigenous peoples have made in shaping and strengthening this community. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here and reaffirm our collective commitment to make the promise and challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our community. Thank you for joining us for tonight's book launch for our Fall 85 Queen author events. It's a part of our City of Kitchener's Imagine It series of programs and events. Before I welcome to tonight's guests, just some housekeeping details about how this virtual event will run. There will be time for Q&A following the conversation, and we invite you to use the Q&A feature. We will monitor the questions, and as time permits, they will be sent to our guests to answer. At this time, I would like to introduce and then invite Elizabeth Renzetti to the screen, who will then introduce tonight's 85 Queen special guests. Following the introduction, Karma and Marissa will join Elizabeth on screen for a conversation. Elizabeth Renzetti is a national columnist with the Globe and Mail. Liz's first novel, based on a true story, was published in 2014 and became a national bestseller. It was also published in 2015 in Australia and the United Kingdom. Her collection of original essays, Shrewd, was published in March of 2018. For a dozen years, Liz was a correspondent in the Globe's London and Los Angeles bureaus, where she learned to shake her fist at the sun and the rain with equal vigor. While avoiding cleaning, she enjoys old movies, horse racing, travel, and not cleaning. She lives in Toronto with her husband, 2 children, and a cat named Purdue, who keeps getting lost. And just today on Twitter, Liz announced that her life is complete because Hillary Clinton quote tweeted a comment of hers. Welcome, Elizabeth. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Yes, I am thrilled. My life is now complete, even more complete because I get to talk to 2 good friends and wonderful, widely loved and best-selling authors, Karma Brown and Marissa Stapley. And we're here tonight, of course, to talk about their new novel written as Maggie Knox, The Holiday Swap. Karma is the author of 5 best-selling novels, most recently Recipe for a Perfect Wife, and the nonfiction bestseller, The 4% Fix. Marissa is the author of 4 best-selling novels, most recently Lucky, which I believe is very soon to be published in the United States. And of course, they've come together very recently as Maggie Knox to create a delightful holiday romance, The Holiday Swap. And it's about twin sisters, Charlie and Cass, one of whom is a high-powered baking show co-host, and the other one runs the family bake shop in a quaint small town. They switch lives for Christmas for reasons that will become apparent when you pick up the book, and hijinks and romance ensue. And you can find the books, of course, in the library, in your favorite independent or big retailer, and on bestseller list. The book has been a bestseller since it came out recently. So please join me in welcoming Karma and Marissa. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hi.
Am I allowed to call you ladies, or is that too retrograde?
Yes.
Okay.
No,
We're all just
You can
ladies.
call us anything.
you can.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Liz. We're honored and thrilled to be doing an event with you, our dear friend.
Yes.
And Hillary Clinton's dear friend, yes.
And
that's
Hillary
right.
Clinton's dear friend.
That was so exciting, Liz. That was exciting.
It was exciting for me. So everybody else in the pandemic baked, but you guys decided to get together and write a novel about baking. So what possessed you to come together during a plague year and write a romantic comedy? And I'm just you guys can decide who would like to speak first.
Well,
you know,
make me
we
choose.
get good at this, right? Like Laurel Hardy. I don't know.
Okay.
We I think also we've been talking about this more often recently and we had actually sort of almost forgotten, almost like we've kind of forgotten how we met. We feel like we've known each other for such a long time. But we were reminiscing the other day, Liz, about, I don't know if you were at the tea with the Coven when we sort of announced to everyone that we were doing,
Yeah, I
reading
think
this
so.
book. Were you there?
I was not.
Oh, you weren't?
You were in Germany, you were
No.
away. So we, I guess a month before that, had started to get kind of antsy about our publishing phases we were both in. So Karma were you writing, Karma? You were working?
No, I was about to promote
You're about
Recipe.
to
I was like,
promote.
yeah, I was about to publish. Yeah.
And I was editing, which is not always my favorite stage. And we were like, what if like, this is, gosh, here we are all alone. It wasn't the pandemic yet. So we didn't know what alone really meant. And we were like,
No.
Imagine if we could swap places and swap lives and ha ha ha. And then the holidays started to roll closer and we just started to crave just something fun and delicious. And then when we told the Coven, it felt like we'd cast a spell and we had to do it. And then why don't you tell the pandemic part of it?
Well, and so yeah, we'll just segue over to then the pandemic hit, and we all know what happened if, the world shut down. And suddenly, I was spending a lot of time on Twitter, as I think a lot of people were, trying to figure out what was happening. And I kept seeing editors talking about how they wanted very happy, sweet reads coming into their inbox. They were all at home in wherever they live, probably not right in Manhattan for a lot of them, but just feeling really isolated from their colleagues. And nobody wanted anything really heavy at that time. So we had already pitched it to our agents and they were like, yes, go. So we were like, oh, okay, well now it's happening. And then we saw that people wanted this kind of read, at least the editors. So we were like, we need to jump on this. Like now is the time for us to try to sell this book. We're already thinking ahead to Christmas time and hoping that it would be a much happier time. And so we did it on a proposal, which is pretty unheard of in fiction, to sell on a proposal and a very solid outline. And then, but we were right. That's what that's what people wanted. And it all just snowballed. You see me using like a wintry, yes. It all just snowballed from there, truly. And here we are, like in this amazing time where it's out, and we have another one out next year, and who knew?
I hope this is the beginning of just an hour of only winter metaphors.
And
I'll try.
Symbolism.
That might be the last one. Now that there's pressure,
I want to get some
it came out
Christmas ones in there.
naturally.
Let's just break the ice right now. And then
Okay, there you
We've
go.
each done one now, so that might be the end of our repertoire.
Okay, we can put it on the back burner for now. But so how did it actually work? I mean, I think everybody's curious about how a process like this works. Was one of you Charlie in one cast, or did you cast it back and forth? How did it work?
We went back and forth with that book. We decided that, and we were saying this yesterday, I think, in another chat we were doing, where it's co-writing would be great if you could sit across the table from your co-author and hash it all out and brainstorm and come up with, help each other through plot challenges that you're in and just have that energy back and forth. But of course we couldn't do that, but we wanted to have our voices in the whole book together. And so for us, taking one twin would have really isolated us to that part of the story. There are two love interests as well. And so, and in two different settings. And so we wanted the opportunity to write all of it. So we really almost went back and forth. Pretty much, right? For the most part.
Yeah, and we took a chapter, and I think sometimes we get a little dicey depending on timing, but most of the time we were just swapping back and forth the twins, and I think we both really liked that because we were never sick of one of the characters. Like you get to a point in a book where you're like, oh gosh, now you know what's coming in the next chapter, and it's not going to be, it's complicated, and you have to deal with it. But we didn't always have to. And there was, like, not to give any spoilers, but the complicated scene at the end with the climax, we were always like, well, I guess you're just going to have to figure out what happens now. Here she goes off down the
Here
path.
you go.
There you
Yeah.
go. So that was a cool way to do it. We did not do that with our next book because it's a male and female character. And I think we found it a little bit harder because you start to be more, you're more proprietary about your characters, and you really are, you're stuck with them. Like and if there's a note from an editor, like it's on you if they're talking about your character. And whereas the last book, we were like, well, I guess we have to figure this one out together. Now it's been more solitary for
And our schedules lined up better the first time. I mean, we were already into the process, and then this time was really hard to get our schedules to line up with where our deadline was with everything else. So splitting it that way, we could not have alternated chapters this time. We just literally could not have made that work. So now we've done it 2 different ways, but
Okay, well, we'll
turned
talk
out.
about the next novel in a few minutes because I want to hear about that. But first I want to ask about 2 names. One, of course, is Maggie Knox and how you came up with it. But the other, I think the greatest maybe cat pun name I've heard is in this book, which is Gateau. So play both on the French gâteau and the Spanish word for cat. So, okay, who came up with Maggie Knox? Why? And who came up with Gateau? I need to know.
Well, I think Gateau was me because I'm the cat lady.
Yes, you are the cat
Although,
lady.
to be very honest with you, I was just thinking Gateau, and I'm like, gee, I'm so smart with that Spanish pun that I didn't even know I was making.
I was like, just go along with it, Marissa. Just nod and yes.
I think with Maggie Knox, so that Gateau is basically Oscar in female form, but like Oscar started eating sandwich meat at some point during the pandemic. I've since made him stop, but that was a big thing for him. So that's in the book. Maggie Knox we needed MK because Marissa and Karma, and I chose my grandmother's name. She was a writer named Maggie Stapley, and then Knox was a bit of a drama, right? Because we wanted it to be just K, which was like K for Karma. And then somebody else already had that name at our publisher. And we kind of were joking, but it was maybe the hardest thing about writing the book was trying to figure out our pseudonym in the end.
And we wanted it short. I mean, we were thinking of all those things, like how it can fit in one line on a book and just easy to remember, and a name that we liked. It was, we went through a lot of names actually where I was like, no, we can't do that name because I went to public school with a girl with that name and I did not care for her, and I cannot have that. How it's like when you're naming your children. It felt a little bit like that when we were trying to choose a name for a kid.
Or naming characters, it's hard.
That is hard. But Maggie Knox then started haunting our Google Docs. She doesn't seem to be
she does. She still does.
She lives that one. Like things happen when she gets
we've had weird things
around, and so she
does write a series of haunted computer mysteries next. That'll be your next project.
Who knows?
Yeah. But I wanted to ask about the romance genre because I personally love romance novels, especially historical romances. I love rom-com movies, and yet they are still, I would say, regarded with some disdain, the genre itself, especially as a literary genre. Why do you think that is, and what did you want to kind of accomplish with it?
Well, it always seems that things women love are like made to feel like they're smaller than they are, right? I mean, the romance has kept many publishers afloat for many moons. Like they sell so many books, and we're even finding, this is such an easy sell and everyone loves it, and we're really proud of it. And I think maybe it's changing. What do you think, Karma? Is there a change in the
I do think there's quite a bit of, I think now, instead of this idea of guilty pleasures with books, how there used to be, well, I have a guilty pleasure I grew up reading Danielle Steele, and there was a time where I'd be like, well, that was my guilty pleasure. I read everything she ever wrote. And that I think is going away, where people are like, you read what you love and who cares what it is. And in fact, we should all be reading a whole diversity of books and enjoying them. Like to just read something that you enjoy, no matter what it is. There should be nothing wrong with that. And I think people are pushing back. I think the romance, Marissa and I have like dipped like a tiny fingernail into the romance pool now, right? There's a lot of authors who have been in there and really changing that to some degree, very vocal about it. And so, yeah, I think it's changing. I hope it is.
I had a conversation. Sorry, Karma. I did.
No, go ahead.
I have one of my mom's cousins is probably the most feminist woman I know, lives on Salt Spring Island. And I told her I wrote The Holiday Swap, and she wrote back and said, well, if you're writing romance, you must be a feminist, because according to her, all romance writers these days are feminists. And I was like, well, we are. And so I don't know. I'm going to explore that, because I'm not sure what that means, but I think there's some power in it.
And we were very careful with our women and with our characters to give them agency and opportunity. And that was something that was very top of mind. I mean, we already do that in our other books. We write about women and women's struggles and journeys. And so it was a natural thing for us to do with these characters in and around the tropes and the boxes that you need to tick when you're writing for this audience, because there are expectations and you have to meet those expectations as well.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, follow up on two of the things you just said there. One is, it does seem to me a very feminist book, especially sort of when you look at like how Charlie is presented, and sort of offered up for the camera as this very beautiful kind of dolled up person, which negates her professional accomplishments. And that doesn't happen to her co-host. So was that important to you to kind of get at a little bit of contemporary culture and the discriminatory practices that we still see there?
Yeah, very much so. We had a lot of conversations about that.
I think it was, we noticed that on, like, you loved watching Zumba, but we always noticed the very accomplished co-host chef, pastry chef in her own right, was wearing a ball gown, and Zumbo had is it Zumba?
Chef whites.
Has chef whites on, and so it was top of mind. But I think we also noticed, one of the things I loved about our writing process was this is just what we did. Like, we didn't even really have to say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. It just was never going to be any other way. And every once in a while we had to remind ourselves, like, no guy can swoop in and save the day. Like, they have to save themselves. But we remind ourselves of that with all of our books. I'm sure you do the same, Liz.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have such great sort of female characters in your other fiction. I would be surprised if you didn't, if Maggie Knox did not also.
Right.
It's interesting what Karma was just saying about, because, every genre has its framework that you need to follow, essentially. And romance, as much, perhaps even more than some of the other genres, there are boxes that you have to tick. So how did you find freedom within that framework?
Trial and error. I mean, we learned a lot as we went, and we also really enjoy the genre ourselves. And so we knew going in the kinds of things that we wanted in our story. We knew the tropes that we like and what we wanted to put in there, but it was a bit of trial and error, and our editors helped us a lot. Like, there were cases where they would be like, okay, we need more of this here and a little less of this here. And so we would just adjust. I think it was easier with our second book.
We knew it. I think, who else? Jennifer Robson knows the author. She loves romance, and she knows. I mean, she would go through our proposal and say, yep, but romance readers don't like this. But she carries this all in her head somehow. And they're not going to go for that. And so that was a huge asset
at the beginning, for sure. Yeah.
But I also think instead of feeling trapped by the framework, in many ways, we were always relieved to be reminded that no matter what, this was going to have a happy ending. Like, that just carried us through.
The HEA, as the romance community calls it. Yeah.
Yeah. And we wanted we wanted a snowy Christmas town and all these little things that just are warm and cozy and friendly and happy. And I mean, that was fun that was our biggest issue. How do we layer more cozy Christmas into the story? It's a good problem to have.
There's a lot of Christmas. There's also two very appealing men in it. So I kind of feel like this would be a, like just the sort of like the dream project, and you get to create these two guys and imbue them with every like good characteristic you want. So
Yeah.
what did you want these two men who, you know, enter Charlene Cass's lives? What did you want them to be like? Or did you have a model in mind as well? Was there like a, I don't know,
I
a
don't
fictional?
know. We sent actors back and forth. I mean, frankly, we wanted them to be very, very good looking. That was that was important. We needed them to be modern heroes and that they were fully evolved. But that was probably the most fun. I mean, it was almost like immediately I was like, well, would it be too much if it was, you know, small town firefighter? And Carmen was like, no, that would
You can never have too much firefighter. No.
and then yeah, never, no, I just that's
But
just
then we added like he's also a photographer. So
Mhm.
you know, it's not just the brawn, he also has this very artistic and sensitive side. And
Yeah.
it was, that was fun.
And then I guess then I was like hot doctor. I mean, who doesn't love like that's just and then I don't know how we ended up with it being a physician assistant. That just seemed to somehow
I
make
don't know
more sense.
either. I think we wanted, and this may not be true, but I think we wanted him to have a little bit of a little more freedom from his
Right.
work,
Yeah.
that he would have the ability to, you know, not have to be there on call for the same number of hours, like if he was a surgeon or something. So
And yeah,
to
and
be available.
we had thought maybe nurse, and then we were like maybe physician assistant. And yeah, we needed him to not be on call because that would have just complicated things. And we needed him to not be super duper ambitious. He needed to maybe one day move somewhere else, you
To a
know,
small town.
small
perhaps.
snowy town.
Who
A
knows?
small town in the mountains in the middle of California. Okay, so this is the other thing. Tell me about why California, why this particular little town, and what was it that spoke to you about? Because the setting is so important, and it is
Well,
very
the town's fictional.
Yeah.
But I remember years ago when I was young, I skied at Heavenly in California. And I remember going across one particular stretch, and I could see there was desert beside me and then snow on the other side. And I was like, this is so wild. I am sort of feel like I'm right between these two totally different climates and worlds. And so I think we were like, well, we can have that. Like where we did talk about where could we have this? Where could we have a snowy town, but also a warm, you
But
know,
then didn't you watch a Hallmark movie and then you were like, oh, this is in every Hallmark movie, like it's California.
oh yeah.
So
Well, you have to be able to go
yeah.
to the beach and then also be skiing like 3 hours later, you know, so that you can have the hot chocolate and the fire and the playing in the snow, and then in your bathing suit in the beach. I mean, you have to have both. And we needed LA because of the reality show.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that hard. We did discuss, do we pick a real place for a little snowy town? But then we were like, no, we just need it to be exactly the way we need it to be. So we fictionalized it.
That's why people write novels, so you can
That's
make it
right.
up.
We were God. We were the
Okay, you brought up the magical words Hallmark movies, so I have to ask, are we all watching all of them? Every year I get suckered in and I watch, I don't even know how many of them. Are you guys fans?
Yes.
We're fans. I think that might be why I stopped early this year, as I said at the beginning, because I just want to relax and watch feel good movies now more than ever, right? Like we need to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And you love it, Karma. That's what you do when you're wrapping your presents is watch.
Yeah, but I haven't wrapped any presents. So I did sneak in a couple of holiday movies in the last couple of weeks, but it wasn't the way I like to do it, which is I have an empty house, which hardly happens now because there's always somebody around, but then I can just like put it on, have a coffee, wrap presents or not, just settle in for a couple of hours. There's something so relaxing and comforting about those movies. You know it's going to be great no matter what is happening. You know, at the end you get that very satisfying, happy ending.
Yeah.
Cheesier the better for me.
I think we should all ask Santa for empty houses this year. Dear Santa, I just want one thing, an empty house.
Just one thing, an empty
Just one
house.
thing. And the baking is such an important part of it. So let's talk about that a little bit. Which of you is the baker in the duo?
Not bread though, but
No.
The Karma's a dessert baker for sure. She's made macarons that look like they should.
Wow.
Once. I made them
Well,
once,
still,
but
you could
they
do it
did
again.
work.
Yeah.
I could. It was finicky, but they were good. I'll try again. Maybe this Christmas. We'll see.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're the dessert baker, and
Yeah.
I did dabble in sourdough.
No,
pre-pandemic.
Marissa, you did not dabble. You obsessively made sourdough for how many months do you think?
Oh gosh, well, it was before the pandemic, and I
It
was
started
making,
before.
yeah, and I mean, sourdough starter does become a whole thing, right? You have to keep it alive and you have to feed it. And I also found people wanted it, so I was always giving it to people, and then it became almost like I was leaving it on my porch for people to come pick up in the height of the pandemic when you couldn't even go outside if somebody came to see you. So it did become quite a large part of my life. So it's really no surprise that it made it into the
Because
Karma was always like, I don't understand. And there's portions of the plot that turn on this starter, and
Yes.
we had endless conversations, and Karma was just like, this
I was like, how do you kill it?
can't.
But Marissa kept trying to make me take starter. I mean, it was almost like a mission for you. Like, she will take some of my starter, which you called Jolene. Do you call it Jolene?
Her name is Jolene. She's
Yeah.
After Dolly Parton.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
And
I
I
don't
was
really
like,
know
I'm
why.
not taking this, I will kill it. And it is now like a sentient being to me, because I will name it, then I will kill it, then I will have guilt. And I can't feed it. I couldn't, the thought of like having to be responsible for taking care of one more thing. So I was like, no, and I never baked one loaf of sourdough bread through the whole pandemic.
And yet you're still friends. This is awesome.
I know, it's okay.
I
She got
try
to
again
do
this year. One day you're going to open your door and there's just going to be this little container. And what are you going to do? You're going to leave it out in the cold?
No,
Don't
then
tell
I
me.
will then I will nurture it, and I will name it, and I will wrap towels around it, and it will become a whole thing.
Yeah.
So save me. And
Everything kind of became a metaphor during the pandemic, didn't it? Like, everything was about nurturing or surviving, or one way or another. And I think it's interesting you talking about how lightness was so important in the publishing industry, but it sounds like it was also important to you to be able to write something that was a little bit more kind of life affirming and light and funny and warm.
Mhm. It
but
really, sorry,
So-
go ahead. Carmen.
I was just, to be honest, I mean, I found like I wanted to read that, or at least watch that, or put that in my, in my AirPods, because I was having a hard time reading and focusing on reading. But writing funny stuff when you're not feeling funny is really hard. There were times where I always was happy to lean into the really romantic elements, but there were times where we'd be like, okay, it's a rom-com. We have to remember to add some of that to it. And I struggled with that. You'd think it would be easy to write. It's hard to write light when the world is not light. For me, anyway, I had a hard time with that sometimes, but
It was hard, and it was hard times. I mean, things were hard, and we were both going through tough times. The pandemic was happening, and it's kind of amazing to me that we did what we did, because we were both really struggling.
Kids were home, everything had gone, sideways.
You guys wrote a lot in a very short period of time. It's a huge accomplishment. I mean, I know you know that, but it is really amazing.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Okay, I'm going to dip into the reader question, or the viewer questions now. Carolyn asks, I hope, are there any tropes you love but don't write, whether because you don't feel like you can do them justice or because you enjoy reading them so much?
I don't know if there's a trope we did not put in this book or the next one. Like, honestly, we've done enemies to lovers for the next one, and the twin swap.
That's my favorite. Enemies to lovers is my favorite trope. But
Me too. That's my absolute favorite.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, maybe name one. I'm kind of drawing a blank on other tropes right now, because we don't write in this genre. We sort of brainstormed them all for both of our novels. And I mean, I would say there's not anything you can't do justice if you put your mind to it, because everything that we did for the holiday swap, twin swap, snowy town, all of these that could have ended up being extremely cheesy, but we put our minds to it. And I think we decided we were
Made
going
it
to
work.
treat it the same way we treated any of our other novels.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And Amy wants to know, speaking of the small town, Amy wants to know what kind of world building went into creating a fictional town in a realistic setting. What sort of details were important to you?
Well, we completely forgot it was Christmas for, oh, I don't know, 150 pages. Marissa and I had to, all of a sudden, we were like, wait a minute, this is a holiday romance. So we had to go back and then start to layer some of those details in, which I think is, that's normal when you're writing a book anyway. There's so many different layers as you do your pass throughs. But yeah,
We
do
both
you have
grew
any?
up in small towns, so I think that there was that, and the whole, we talked a lot like that fishbowl aspect of a small town. We knew that was really, really important. I mean, LA was fairly easy, and I had been to LA that January, so it was kind of fresh.
We
I
Googled
really-
a lot of
we did a lot of
little
Google
snowy towns.
travel. I thought a lot about Stars Hollow because I love the show Gilmore Girls. So really that was always in my mind, which was fun for me because I love that show.
And Stephanie wants to know, did you start with the story plotted out, or did the story evolve organically? And maybe you can talk little bit about how that process is different in this Maggie Knox book than it would be from one of the novels you write on your own.
Karma, do you want to take a moment and picture a world where we pantsed our way through a draft together? Just
No.
close your eyes.
Explain
I
the difference between
can't.
plotting and pantsing, Marissa.
So plotting is when you have an outline and you do your outline before you start, and pantsing is when you just dive right in and you're like, let's see where this thing goes. So.
And perhaps who is who based on what Marissa just said. But I mean, I don't consider myself a plotter, although I'm definitely more on that side. I am like a plantser, which I like to have a synopsis and an outline, and then I like to just be free to write. But Marissa's more of like the, let the spirit move me and let my hands get onto the keyboard.
I plan. I do a blind first draft sometimes.
A blind first draft. And then, but we
Mhm.
knew we couldn't do that. Like
Mhm.
we sort of had to, I mean, I think we even did more outlining than I would do for any of my novels, because we were writing first on proposal and we needed an outline that went right to the end. And it was very detailed.
Mhm.
And because we were sharing, like you need to know some of, I might get ahead of her a couple of chapters, or she might be ahead of me, and we had to really know where the story was going. That was critical for us.
So I don't know how it would be very difficult to write with someone else unless you really did know very firmly where you were going. But we had a rigorous outline, and we had really sold it on that outline too. So we really had to stick with it. But yeah, I don't know how you would do it any other way with a co-author.
I mean, you could, I guess, just totally wing it, but
Mhm.
then be prepared for a very, very hard edit on that first pass. But I mean, you are playing off each other, and whether in the first book where we were taking turns with the characters, so we were both sort of in each of the stories, or in this book where we are each doing one character, like you're still really needing the other person's dialogue and their like brainstorming and wisdom about what's happening, in that setting and in that chapter. So it's, we stuck to our outlines pretty close until we had edits, and then we had to rip it all apart and then re-outline.
As it always happens. Okay, since we're talking tell us a little bit about the next book and who did what parts, and was that difficult? How did that work? And when is it coming out? Just tell us a bit about the next one.
I think are we going to try to keep a secret who wrote which character for the next book?
Okay.
I think we are. I mean, the fact that I'm not sure it's secret means that I'll blow
Somebody already knows.
But so it's called All I Want for Christmas. As we said, it's enemies to lovers is our trope. It's our pitch is Nashville meets the hating game. We have a male and female character, and we each took a character, and they are contestants on a reality show called Star Maker. It's kind of like American Idol set in Nashville. They get paired up for that week. They have sizzling hot, like Civil Wars type crazy chemistry, and really don't get along when they're not singing. But of course, they're asked to stick together. Then they end up pretending to be a couple. You know, one
Yeah,
thing
it
leads to
has a lot of
another.
tropes too. Yeah, yeah, they're a fake couple, and what else did we fit in there?
They
There's
have
a little bit of it that takes place in Canada, which is fun for us.
Oh,
We
good.
sent them to Banff for
Yeah.
some time,
Yeah.
so
some snowy fun in a
some snowy fun.
mountain backdrop. So there's that. And it's fun. So we just handed in our second draft of that, and it's out next October. Same, if all God willing, it will,
Yeah.
if this edit
Yeah.
goes well, pretty much exactly the same time as the holiday swap came out
Yeah.
next year.
Carolyn wants to know what the perfect reading experience would be for the holiday swap. Would it be like by a fireplace? And what from the book, which would be a good snack to accompany the reading of the book?
I think you
Well,
should read it in the arms of a firefighter by a blazing fire. Just kidding. I'm
with your
Or a
pet,
Dr. Seuss.
either the dog at your feet or the cat on your lap, and probably a nice slice of Starlight Peak bread, right? It could be toasted with some honey butter and
Mhm. Or a lemon
Right?
square. Considering
lemon
Starlight bread
square.
doesn't really exist. I'm still craving the lemon lavender square, but I'm not going to bake it because I'm not really a
No.
baker. So yeah,
Lavender's tricky, I will say. It's a
Mm.
tough one to put into baked goods.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't
Yeah,
know.
fire-
A fire sounds nice.
Yeah. We
In
haven't
an
talked much
empty
about the-
house.
I was just going to ask you about the twin aspect, because I'm fascinated by twins. I think everybody is who's not a twin. My daughter's best friends are twins, and I cannot tell them apart. And I'm sure they create like more havoc than I can even imagine in their world, pretending to be each other. So were you guys always fascinated by twins? And what about twins did you love and want to explore?
You had a book you were going to write about twins.
Yeah.
I think that's where that came from. Like that was one of your
Yeah.
sort of castaway ideas, right?
Which now I can't even believe that I thought about writing that book. It was like dark, and these sisters are identical twins, and one of them sabotages the other. I mean, I don't know what I was thinking. I went
On
way
YouTube.
down
Yeah.
the rabbit hole with that one.
Hmm.
But when it came time for this, and we were discussing like what would, what about a holiday romance? Okay, well, what would we do? What would this look like? It was like, wouldn't it be fun? That switching lives, like that twin swap. And if you couldn't
Mhm.
tell them apart, I mean, just the romantic comedy options with twins, there's a lot there to play
Mhm.
with.
Yeah,
And
I
so
think we just thought it would be, I think that was the first thing, was like switcheroo. Like if we're gonna
Yeah.
do this, it's gonna be a switcheroo. And then I think identical twins.
And
is
two
really-
love interests. I mean,
Yeah.
how can you go wrong with two love interests? That's fun.
Yeah, it's true. It's such a darkness and lightness with twins, like both this kind of beautiful bond, and then it seems slightly oppressive sometimes,
Yeah,
Um,
I can imagine that.
So
I think our
maybe,
twins feel that a little bit, right? They feel a little like they're slightly misunderstood by one another because there were assumptions made about who was who and who would do what, and that wasn't necessarily exactly who they were at the end. So yeah.
somebody Stephanie would like to know if you guys would write together in a different genre, perhaps.
I don't know. I mean, I couldn't imagine co-authoring something dark. Like I think it would almost have to be a fun rom-com. Yeah, I don't think so.
We did we not talk about that a little bit? Like when we were saying, I mean, it all started with wouldn't it be, imagine if we collaborated, like imagine
Yeah.
writing with someone else. And then I do think we were like, well, what would we do, a thriller? And then both of us were like, no, that's not for us.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, did we go, what were you either going to go like super dark murder fest
Yes.
or
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, holiday twin swap? And then it happened to be Christmas was coming. So we decided not to murder anyone. But if it had been October, who knows?
Who knows? But we wanted that happy, like we wanted that.
We
Our
wanted
books
happy.
don't have that happy ending feel, not always, like they're a little more complicated in their endings. And so there was something so appealing about that, about
Mhm.
just being able to lean right into these like delicious holiday tropes that oh, they're just so fun to read and to write and to think
Yeah.
about. And so, and it was such a departure for us. Like it really, I mean, the murder thing would have been really out there too.
Mhm.
Who knows? Maybe
Yeah.
next year it will be
Who
some,
knows?
some crime, murder, oh gosh, no.
Do you guys have a favorite? Amy would like to know favorite holiday movie, holiday rom-com or movie?
I loved Let It Snow. I think came out last year based on the novel that John Green co-authored with other people I can't think of right now. Really love that one.
Holiday is it is underrated as far as I'm concerned. Holiday.
Is that the Queen Latifah one? No,
No.
no, okay.
They go on, there are a couple who end up like just meeting and they end up being each other's dates for a
That's
year for every family event, like Easter and Christmas and Halloween. And it's a little like raunchier than the Hallmark holiday movies. So I enjoy watching that one.
I love that.
Um,
I love
yeah.
Christmas in Connecticut, Barbara Stanwyck, which is about
Oh,
this.
I haven't seen that one. I
Yeah,
need to.
she's like this fake cookbook author and columnist, and she gets stuck in snowy Connecticut. And anyway, it's
Oh,
very
nice.
funny.
This sounds up your
Screwball.
alley, Karma. I can't believe you watched that one.
I know. Well, Netflix really wants me to watch The Christmas Inn. Is this they are really pushing that one. I don't know if anyone has watched The Christmas Inn, like INN.
No.
But if you have, please put a comment in and tell me what you think. So I maybe don't go down a 2-hour Netflix. But every time Netflix gets opened, it's like, oh, the Holiday Inn is available for you to watch right now. Like, okay, I know, I'll get there.
Do you sometimes feel like Netflix is your therapist? Like
Yes.
Netflix is just there knowing exactly what your worst and best habits are. Angel and a devil on our
100%.
shoulders.
Get the email in the middle of the day. Like I get that sometimes. It's like, no, on Netflix. I'm like, well, I have an hour and a half. So until the kids get home from school.
Well, speaking of, somebody wants to know if the holiday swap will be a Hallmark or Netflix movie. Are you guys going to option? Is that an option to option?
It's an option. We have, we hope so. I think we can't quite say anything and we are hoping we would love to see one of our books make it to the screen because we envision both of them as Hallmark movies. Like
Yeah.
that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know yet. I mean, we have to just wait and see. Maybe there'll be a Christmas miracle.
Well, it'll be filmed in Ontario like every other Hallmark movie is. It'll be filmed in like Unionville
Yeah.
or Aurelia or something.
Yeah,
so.
there's a town near Ottawa that we found out about that they're all filmed in. It's called, starts with an A, Apsley or I don't know. I'll have to.
Yeah, I can't remember now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, we should all go.
We have a couple more questions. I think we have time for just a few more questions, and I am going to pull from the audience here. And Tammy wants to know how many people read the first draft before you turned it in. You mentioned Jen Robson, and did you agree on who your readers would be? That's a good question.
Oh, well, I don't think we had anybody read. I don't even think Jen really read. I think she read our proposal. Like, I feel
She read the first 100 pages, I think.
maybe it was just Jen. Yeah. But then our agents, and that's each other.
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, I think it would be tricky. I find beta readers a tricky thing. I don't do it anymore. When you are working with an editor, you just really have to curtail who you're handing it to. But with us, I think it would have been really hard to have other voices plus our voices getting feedback before we started submitting it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it was just with us, really.
Yeah. And Veronica wants us to know that A Castle for Christmas is what we should be watching on Netflix.
Oh,
I, in fact, did start
Yes.
that because it's got Carrie Elwes and Brooke Shields in it. So
yes.
Finally.
Okay.
a demographic that's not like 22-year-olds. I was very happy to see that.
Nice.
Mhm.
Okay.
Castle
It will
for
be
Christmas, duly noted.
next up.
Yeah.
And Carolyn wants you to finish this sentence. It's not a holiday romance without ...
Hot firefighters. Just kidding. Snowy towns.
Yeah. I think that's true for us anyway. It is not a holiday romance without snow. Lovely falling snow and Snow
Why
that keeps you in your cabin.
Yes, with the fire on and a hot firefighter there to make sure it doesn't get out of hand.
Right.
Exactly.
But what I'm curious about is the holiday genre is still so popular. So we have this tension between this kind of idealized version of what happens, and then there's what actually often happens, which is a giant shit show. Often.
Yeah.
I apologize for my language, but so why do you think people are continually drawn to? Is it just,
It's that reason, I think, exactly.
Yeah.
It's the idyllic vision of what, often though in those movies, Christmas doesn't go super well. Like there's inevitably some family get together or gathering that everything falls apart, secrets come out, everyone's, well, what's happening? That feels more accurate for Christmas. But
I think too, people want to be distracted. I mean, sometimes I think these reads that are just easy to read and get swept away by is because people have to go and be distracted from their families. And they're like, well, I'm just over here reading my, wonderful little, never mind what's going on over there.
Yeah.
I knew a book publicist who actually got in trouble over Christmas one year because she was reading. And even though everybody else was on their phones, like scrolling, they found her reading to be antisocial. I thought that was so interesting.
Really?
I know, because we're all such readers here, like
Mhm.
in our group.
I would love it. Just pull out a book at the table when everyone else is on their phone and just be like, I can do that.
Yeah.
Where's our Christmas
That's
goals?
interesting.
Just a couple more quick things. For me, I'm curious, do you guys have a favorite romance novel it doesn't even have to be like, it can be romance adjacent, but is there a love story that really speaks to you in literature?
My favorite love story of all time is The Time Traveler's Wife.
Same. Yeah.
And, we did not accomplish that here, but, there was
Different book.
swapping of lives. So, but yeah, that's just such a beautiful romance. And then I read a great romance this summer that Jen recommended called Evie Drake Starts Over, which involves a retired pitcher who moves to a small town, and that was a pretty good romantic hero too. The sort of torn down, failed pitcher in the major leagues. It doesn't sound good now that I'm saying it, but Jen was saying like the moment where she sees him and he's throwing pine cones at a tree and the pine cones disintegrating, and there was just something that really, really worked there. So that's a good one. Evie Drake Starts Over, I'd recommend for good romantic lead. And again, another like feminist rom-com. It's fun.
Karma, do you want to add?
Oh.
Or do you want?
The Hating Game is always one that I go back to because I don't know, I just love that book.
Yeah.
Something about, again, the enemies to lovers story. But yeah, but I think it's funny, Marissa, that The Time Traveler's Wife for us, like that was the book that popped in my mind, because often Marissa and I feel differently about books, which is like sometimes I'll love a book and she won't, or she'll love a book and I won't. And so when you said that, I was
like our base with, who we really love, like that book, Lauren Groff, John Irving, I think it may be like somebody hands us a book, we'll feel differently, but our bedrock of
that's true. Our foundational authors and books are actually very much in line. But yeah, that's such a beautiful story.
What was the one though that we really disagreed on that I couldn't believe you didn't love? What was that? And I couldn't.
Was it John Green?
Oh yeah, maybe.
I don't think he's watching. It's okay.
I know, but people love that book.
We can't. That's not. No, we won't go there.
We won't.
Okay.
We didn't even say what book, so it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
And the last question, which I think is a good one to end on, is do you think that what has this process taught you about working together? Like, what are the lessons that you could maybe turn into a self-help book one day? No, Karma's like, I'm never writing a self-help book again.
No, I've done that. Check that box. That one's done.
But what lessons did you learn that about each other, or what did you learn about working together that you would pass on to other people possibly?
You just have to trust each other. I mean, it's really hard. Like we work on our own and we have our books and we are our own bosses. And then when you work with someone else, you actually have to trust that if you're swapping chapters, the other person's going to get it to where it needs to be for you, or that, their character is going to do what you need their character to do, so your character can do what your character is doing. But it's a tremendously difficult thing. I mean, I was just texting Karma the other day. I was like, I'm watching the Beatles documentary, and like, we were better than the Beatles because like these guys, they're struggling. Like, there's stuff happening, but it's tough, right? Creatives we are creative people, so we have our quirks. Anyway, Karma, I don't know what you have to say, but I think
that does sum it up. I mean, we jokingly, someone had asked us, like, what advice do you have for people who want to co-write? And we both started laughing, and then we were like, well, don't do it, because there's more complexity than not. And I think that you can, we leaned into our professionalism and our work ethic and our experience. And if we didn't have other books also going at the same time, it would have been easier, like if it wasn't during a pandemic and our kids were always at home and needing us, it would have been easier. Like, there were a number of things that complicated the process for us, for sure. But, like Marissa said, I think just trusting the other person, remembering it is your book together, not just your book to make the decisions on. And yeah, we presented a pretty united front, I think, when we sat down with our editors. Like, we knew where we wanted the story to go. Of course, we were very open to, our editors are great, and they're very specific about what they'd like us to do in the book, which we really enjoy, because it's actually nice to be given direction sometimes.
It is nice. It is nice.
Yeah.
And we notice it. It doesn't happen with our other books. Like, we reflected when we got our last set of editorial notes and the meeting, and I was like, wow, like they were like, actually, you need to do this, and this, and this. I'm like, that never happens. I'm like, no problem. We can do those 5 things that you told us to do. Like, we will do that. But I think too, like, it did all work out in the end, right? Like, there's this happy ending. The writing process is hard for every book, but with the holiday swap certainly had a happy ending, and we're getting there with All I Want for Christmas. So
yeah, we still have a number of rounds, right? We have copy edits, probably more edits. There's always more edits. There's always edits until there isn't. And then it just goes off and you're like, oh, I guess we're done.
Well, at least you didn't break up, John and Paul. So I'm very glad about that.
That's right.
And product is super successful and on, as I say, on bestseller lists. So and wonderful read for Christmas. So I want to thank you both, Marissa and Karma, for joining the audience tonight. And thank you, audience. Those were such terrific questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Liz.
everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Liz.
Liz, thank you so much for joining us at Kitchener Library tonight. We appreciate you guiding the conversation and all the audience questions. Karma and Marissa, thank you for being here to share Maggie's first book. And I can't wait until we can be together again in our theater next December, launching All I Want for Christmas. I'm going to work on the decadent treats, the drinks, and possibly a hot firefighter to interview the two of you.
Nice.
And to tonight's audience, thank you for choosing to spend some of your evening with us and for all of your questions. Thanks for joining us tonight. Ladies, thank you for being here. Good night. See you in the new year, and happy holidays.